Well, first things first, thank you for joining me.
Yes, thank you.
Right.
Thank you for inviting me, Aidan. I'm very excited about participating in this event to showcase the different cultures in the city of Taunton and ethnic groups. It's unbelievable how many, it's just growing. And it's good to know what other people have been through as a people in this nation and in this city. Yeah, yeah.
That's very well said. I can't top
Thank
that with
you.
anything. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So first, I'd just like you to tell us a little bit about yourself. So if you want to,
Oh,
your life story, so to speak.
my I come from a military family. My father was in the U.S. Army for 26 years. He's a veteran of the Vietnam and Korean conflict. He is buried in Arlington National Cemetery. My mother had a sister who lived here in Taunton, and we traveled. He went to Vietnam 1968. We came here from Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and we've been here ever since. My mother saw the need. There weren't many minorities here. It was segregated. And it was sad because when you're on a military installation, it's already integrated. So all my friends come from all over the world. Okay, I grew up with French and German and Japanese and Korean mothers and their children and the families, Black and Puerto Rican. And it was already international. And we come to Taunton and it was really a total nightmare because you're like, wow, where's this place? And then we were on our way to Thailand. Can you imagine? And we're all psyched. We're going to Thailand because I grew up in France. And then Uncle Sam, the military, they called my father, and within 24 hours, you're going to Vietnam. So here we are. My mother saw the need to be a role model because there were no minorities in any position of authority in Taunton. And so the day my dad went to Vietnam, my mother that Monday was working in the Taunton Public School system. Oh. And she stayed there for 32 years until she passed on in 2000. She went to historically Black college in Daytona, Florida, called Bethune-Cookman College. And that's where she got her teaching license. But you can imagine being in the Deep South and Jim Crow. And my mother made us live every time there was a break in school, my mother would drive. My mother would drive from Oklahoma, Texas, Kentucky, wherever my father was stationed, we'd always go to Florida to visit her family. Hattie Arlene Williams and my father, Cunningham. So her and my Aunt Kathryn and my Aunt Allie Mae McCone, who lived here in Taunton, they were domestics at the Dinner Bell Motel. They cleaned those rooms. And my mother picked cotton. They didn't have Pell Grants to go to school or scholarships. They were, no, this is an HBCU. And sometimes they would have by the 60s, that's when they had scholarships and the Black community come together. But mother said she'd pick cotton, and cotton is so hard. If you ever see a cotton ball, it's in that hard shell.
Yeah.
And it would cut you. It's like a razor, and you'd have to wrap your hands in cotton strips. Wrap your hands, because that hard shell is like a razor and cut you. And then too, you don't want blood on that white cotton ball. And that's, and Black people are still picking cotton. Mm. To this day, you can go down south and see Black people still picking cotton. So here goes mother. She graduated cum laude. She was Dr. Mary McLeod. Dr. Bethune, yes, that was her married name. She was good friends with First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. Mm-hmm. So there's a picture of my mother in the old Colony Society with her, Dr. Bethune, and two other women. It was a social event. They're all dressed in Black. Black life was, it was, see, back then you had Black doctors and accountants, bankers, nurses, farmers. We had our own Black community. We're very proud of it. And we didn't know any different. We just got in the car and we went back to the base we were on. But mother graduated cum laude, but she wasn't able to get a teaching position because she wasn't light enough. Back then, the color of your skin, if you looked more Caucasian, you could get a job. Other than that, you had to remain as a domestic. My mother used to tell us, when the lights come on, you have to be over the bridge. Back in what they called colored town. Mm-hmm. That's segregated communities. But the bridge was so old and rickety, and anybody could have fallen into the river below. That river, the manatees swam there. They swim there now. We didn't know they were there. It was just something, the South and Jim Crow and my mother exposing us to that. And I remember as we traveled, the colored fountains, whites, only water fountains, and I'd be drinking out of both of them. She used to be outraged because I didn't know. See, I didn't have that. See, we weren't raised Jim Crow. Mm-hmm. We had to live Jim Crow going through the South. And so I always wanted to know what was the difference. I didn't know colored water. I'm thinking colored water. What's colored water? What's white water? And we thought when we saw that on the bathrooms, I said, "Oh, Ma, a colored bathroom." We thought it was rainbow colored. Not that it was filthy, dirty, and disgusting. We're kids. We're like, oh, colored bathroom. Oh, it must be beautiful. And my mother's standing there and she's just waiting. And we're like, oh, Ma, it's dirty in here. So, of course, we always had to bring cleaning supplies. Mm-hmm. Because, oh, God, she was fun to be with. She taught us about our Black history. You're not going to find it in a high school book. Because you got to really know. My mother took us everywhere. And And she didn't want us to have that stigma about being black in America. It wasn't a crime, even though we were treated like criminals. And it was sad because we didn't know back then as children growing up why we were so hated and resented. But she made us learn our history. So here we are in segregated Taunton. Well, it was kind of segregated, but my mother fought for racial equality, even in this city. This is late 60s, early 70s. There were a lot of places as a young girl, we couldn't go over to a lot of white people's homes. Mm-hmm. You imagine that in Taunton? So my mother, and then too, if there was a party, if a classmate was given the party, they would say none of the black boys could come. And so my brother Jimmy, he's a basketball, football. He was a star athlete, him and Walter Harrigan, they're like brothers. So my mother said, if your brother can't go, nobody goes. And so our house became the kid magnet house. All the kids in the neighborhood could come here. And on the weekends, you never knew who was in the family room in the basement because everybody would sleep over, and my mother was always cooking for extra kids and breakfast Saturday mornings. My father did 2 tours of Vietnam. And back then that was a big deal. So they made an agreement that we just be between wherever my father was stationed so my mother can be. She said, she says, I'm a role model, not only for those black kids, but especially for the white kids, because they're not going to see many black people in positions of authority. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. And they all loved her. And so she ended up at Bonham School. Then she went to Ware Grammar. And that was, Ware Grammar was one of the poorest schools in Taunton. And I remember my mother used to have like bags of most of these kids were from the Ware and Paul Bunker. And it was the beginning of, these young mothers, single mothers having children. They're on welfare. They have addiction problems, alcohol, drugs. So the little things would dress themselves and get on the bus and go to school. And back then it was so much colder than it is now. And a lot of them weren't even dressed properly. Mm-hmm. So she'd have socks for the boys and girls, t-shirts, underwear, and things so that, to keep them warm. And, and some of those kids weren't fed. Do you imagine sending your child off? And so she had a heart for those kids at Ware Grammar. She always fought for civil rights. She fought for the desegregation of Taunton Public Schools. I got the sign still downstairs in the basement. One time, we had Black social clubs back then. Mm-hmm. It was called, the first one was called the Concerned Afro Coalition. It was a group of middle-class Black families. It was to teach Black history, we had social events and to raise money for college scholarships. And there was another um, Black teacher. Her name was Ada Williams. She was the home ec teacher over at Mulcahy School.
Mm.
Mother was the first Black teacher in a classroom and teaching the 3 R's. But all these Black families, like I said, they working class and highly educated, because coming from the South, education was everything. You worked, everybody worked, saved their money, put somebody through college. And my mother stressed that to us poor kids, that college education is important. But she also knew that we were going to face much resentment, rejection. My mother was also active politically, and so she brought the NAACP to Taunton. And our first march was at Sambo's. That was, and it was in Rainham. And why we didn't need a Sambo's, but we couldn't stop them from building that establishment. So while we were protesting, I was in high school, and you have those big signs, about change the name and all that. So while we're standing there, we're marching peacefully, just going around. Cars were coming in. I saw classmates of mine go by, and they would use the N word and go back to Africa because they couldn't, you have like 40 people marching, and you have these big signs, and you're just yelling stuff out the window on a beautiful afternoon, Saturday. And that's when you got most of the people. And then one weekend, a white man drunk from Cape Cod, he came down and he saw the people protesting, and he shot at my mother and another one of the protesters. The Rainham police came and arrested my mother and let the white drunk man go home. So she had to get, it's like, they were trying to charge her with inciting a disturbance. Taunton wasn't used to people protesting. Rainham definitely wasn't used to people coming, but they knew that restaurant the name of the restaurant was going to be a problem. Mm-hmm. And so they arrested my mother, and I believe they put her in jail until she went over to Rainham. Pacheco, I believe, was the captain over there, and Willie Harris, that was the other protester, and they gave him court dates, filed charges against him. So they're in Taunton court, and of course they had to get a lawyer and spend money, and the judge, I don't know who the judge was that day. They threw it out, and within 6 months, Sambo's was gone, because thank God for that, because nobody really, down south, they were there in the South. But New England, no, it's, you know, people, and then people stop going there. If people are not going there, guess what? You're not making any money. And then it became the Taunton Federal Credit Union. And then before you know it, it was torn down. She could talk about what it was like to overcome, and she overcame Jim Crow and um, uh, segregation and all that ugliness. She overcame her grandfather, my great grand. He was lynched by the Klan, and they hung him. Then they threw the body on the railroad tracks, and I guess some black men going home to lunch, they found his body on the tracks and realized what had happened and carried him home to my great grandmother. And back then you couldn't bring charges against a white man. Didn't understand. And to this day, I cannot find his death certificate because you know when that group takes your life, it's not a pretty picture.
Mm.
So what else can I tell you? Where was I? I had to throw that in about because it's about protests. Well, I don't know why they killed my great grandfather. And no, you couldn't talk. That's one thing. If the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan killed the family member, only the people in the community know, and you don't talk about it. And it took, I think I was in my 20s before they brought that up. And one thing about Black history in the South, it was more oral than written
Mm-hmm.
because they were still trying to um, keep Blacks illiterate. Thank you. And I remember my Uncle Freddie, he'd break down my mother's uncle, and he'd start, they killed my pappy. And then we knew, we knew. But like I said, you talk and then you say no more. You know what I'm saying? And there were things even in the Taunton public school system, the the way they, you know, even some of the teachers she worked with treated her differently. And all because of the color of her skin. And she was the sweetest thing. She was hard on us because she knew what it was like growing up Jim Crow.
Mm-hmm.
What my white friends did, I couldn't do. If I got caught, I'm the one who they're gonna put in jail and punish. And so there are a lot of things she had to teach us about being Black in America. If a cop is calling us the N word, you say, yes, sir, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, ma'am. I'm the things you're taught. People think that white cops just started killing us. They've been killing us for hundreds of years. Only now everybody's got a cell phone with a video camera. And so now you can see it. We weren't lying. You were killing us. Please stop killing us. She fought the good fight all the way to the end.
Mm-hmm.
She ran the race to the finish. She kept the faith. And she was sickly. She had diabetes, heart disease. When she lost her right leg. That's when she retired because she didn't think she could keep up with little sixth graders. But she used to do this thing where, you know, as a teacher, the kids spend more time with their teacher than sometimes their own parents.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, y'all need a hug? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then she'll get in the middle and they all made this ball and they're just laughing and giggling and they're all hugging one another. See, at that age, 6 years old, they're not being taught to hate.
Mm-hmm.
But my mother said by third grade, they know because their parents are teaching them things. My mother says you should never teach a child to hate anybody. Why should you care who they hang around with or who they bring home or who they fall in love with? I think sometimes, but see, now this is 40, 50 years later. You go to Trukey's, you see white grandmas with their little brown and black little grandkids, and it's like, wow, you know, things are changing, but we still have a long way to go. And but like I said, she wanted to make a difference in the lives of young people's minds that go get an education, contribute, serve, make a positive impact on your community.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's who she was, Aidan. I wish you had met her because and she was soft spoken. I had the rebel in me. I'm not a I saw Jim Crow and I didn't think it was right. So I could never live down south because I don't think like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But Black people are going to vote. We ain't going to give up our right to vote. We are going to march on because we have rights too. There you go, Aidan.